Welcome to Operation Saturation, on the threshold. Have a seat. Your mission briefing will begin in a minute. First, I want to share some good news from the front. I think we might actually be able to do this. I mean, for us, you, me, to literally change the world around this whole global climate change thing. We just might be riding the wave of history here. I know that sounds delusional, but I'm going to share some recent events that I think demonstrate that although it is a long shot, it is also a very real possibility. And just in case it inspires you to renewed efforts in spreading the word, I'll also share some more tools for doing so that have come up since I finished posting that whole bruising series of How It All Ends videos in October. By the way, kudos to those of you who've actually watched all 6 hours. You've got stamina! Before I give you the updates, keep in mind that what we are passing on, this viral idea that we are hoping will spread like wildfire, is not a call to action on climate change. Those have been issued repeatedly for years, and the body politic has shown itself to be immune from that particular virus. The potential here for a torrent, for a real viral growth in this particular idea, comes from its unique feature that it cuts through the deadlock by changing the issue from the typical question of, is it happening, to the untypical question, can we afford to ignore the possibility? So it is not a statement that we are passing along, it's a question. And I think that's partly why the message has done well so far. Okay, here's the update. There is really good news, so hang in there, because first we're going to cover some really bad news. First up, last summer, 2007, showed record melting in both Greenland and the Arctic on a scale and pace that stunned the scientific community. When I learned of this, and particularly when I read the reactions of the research scientists who are familiar with those areas, I had a sinking sense of, is this it? Is this the moment that history is going to look back and point to, saying this is where it all started to unravel? See, the reason I'm so agitated about the possibility of catastrophic climate change is not just the scale of what might happen. It's how imminent and sudden it just might be. It's the possibility of hidden tipping points and abrupt climate change. The image that comes to mind, for me, is of us striding industriously right into a minefield without even breaking pace. We might indeed make it out the other side unscathed, but with every step, I wonder, is this it? Is this it? Maybe you can understand why I feel a little panicky about getting the word out ASAP. Another update, there's an absolutely stunning statement from the CEO of Royal Dutch Shell, the parent company of Shell Oil, in which he sketches out 2 possible scenarios for the future, which he calls scramble and blueprints. It almost knocked me out of my chair, because in it he called for all the things that huge multinational companies are supposed to be against. Regulations, cross-border cooperation, sounds a lot like the UN, doesn't it? Efficiency standards, taxes, and get this, an effort to transform our energy economy comparable to the Apollo project. And the last thought he leaves with his reader, quote, companies can suggest possible routes to get there, but governments are in the driver's seat, unquote. Oh my God, I thought when I read it. Things must be even worse than I thought. I mean, for someone that entrenched in the status quo to say things that radical really is extraordinary. Check it out for yourself. The link is in the video description. Next time you come across someone parroting Michael Crichton, claiming that global warming is a hoax by scientists to keep the grant money flowing, whip out this statement and ask them how likely they think it is that the chair of the 7th largest company in the world has been so completely suckered. I also came across 2 more heavyweight reports from sources contradicting their normal bias. Remember how I suggested we put such things near the top of the credibility spectrum in the video risk management? The first study, called National Security and the Threat of Climate Change, is from a think tank funded by the Navy and involved all sorts of top-ranking retired military guys. The lowest-ranked guy there was a lieutenant general. Must have really sucked for him when the other guys tried to send him out for coffee. Their assessment echoes the 2003 Pentagon report that I shared in the video Scare Tactics, but carries more heft and is more recent, 2007. I'll let you explore it in detail on your own. Again, the link is in the video description. But I'd just like to point out here that when military commanders characterize their conversations as sobering, that should catch your attention. Career military planners aren't exactly known for being all that hysterical in the first place. The other study, called The Age of Consequences, is a collaboration between 2 global security think tanks conducted by a multidisciplinary team of high mucky-mucks, including not just climatologists and a historian, but also the head of the National Academy of Sciences, a Nobel laureate economist, a former CIA director, a former chief of staff to the president, and a former national security advisor to the vice president. Not exactly a bunch of enviro ninnies. In fact, it looks surprisingly like what I had proposed for a Manpalo project, except tiny. Their purpose was to employ the best available evidence and climate models and imagine 3 future worlds that fall within the range of scientific plausibility, end quote. The report points out that, quote, the scientific community has been shocked at how fast some effects of global warming are unfolding. Recent observations indicate that projections from climate models have been too conservative. The effects of climate change are unfolding faster and more dramatically than expected, unquote. And then it goes on in that happy tone to envision 3 future scenarios: the expected, the severe, and the catastrophic. Oh boy, did that put a pit in my stomach. I have a sort of funny, macabre story about that. I was approaching the end of the middle scenario, the severe scenario, which looked way too much like my grid's worst case scenario, when I read these lines. Quote, the consequences of even relatively low-end global climate change includes the loosening and disruption of societal networks. At higher ranges of the spectrum, chaos awaits, unquote. And I stopped reading, thinking, I just can't take more. This is the middle scenario. And then I thought, no, it doesn't serve me to shrink from reality. It's not in my best interest, no matter how unpleasant it is. So I made myself read the next line, which is what gave me the macabre little chuckle, because it said, quote, the question is whether the threat of this magnitude will dishearten humankind or cause it to rally in a tremendous generational struggle for survival and reconstruction, unquote. Yeah, well, I guess we have our answer about how this little piece of humankind reacted to that picture. That section goes on to say, quote, if that rally does not occur early on, then chances increase that the world will be committed irrevocably to severe and permanent global climate change at profoundly disruptive levels. An effective response to the challenge of global warming cannot be spread out across the next century, but rather must be set in place in the next decade in order to have any chance to meaningfully alter the slope of the curves one sees in the IPCC report. We are already in the midst of choosing amongst alternative futures. The onset of these choices is rapid, and the consequences are likely to be irreversible. Can you see how I get just a little frustrated when someone just casually dismisses my concerns, saying that I'm overexcitable or that I've been duped by the environmentalists and the liberals? Remember, that was the middle scenario. And recall who wrote the report. It wasn't the Sierra Club. And I'm sorry, but I failed you. I just couldn't bring myself to read the third catastrophic scenario. Not just yet, at least. I guess in that I'm not a very good role model. I did catch in the introduction that when the participants were discussing the third scenario, one of them actually made reference to the movie Mad Max, just like I did in my videos. That's just yucky, because I keep hoping that I am just overexcitable, and so it sucks when I keep finding credible sources who come to the same conclusions I did. Seems like every time we look, the picture is worse than we thought it would be. So we adjust our expectations for next time, and when we look again, it's even worse than that. But we can't afford to just roll over. We've got to avoid falling prey to those 3 stages of denial of environmental problems that I shared in the video, Your Mission. Do you remember them? Stage 1, there is no problem. Stage 2, okay, there's a problem, but it's not significant, or it's not us doing it. And finally, stage 3, oops, now it's too big for us to do anything about. We've got to insert a stage 2.5 in there. Stop dithering and get off our butts. And that is what you and I are doing here, because there is hope. And that's what I want to talk about now. I've given you some serious doom and gloom, so now let me tell you about some really heartening developments in the last couple months.